Welcome back to my channel. My name is Danielle Gunther, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about some applied learning theories, specifically the cognitive load theory, the types of memory that pertain to that, and three types of cognitive load. And then we're going to move on to the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, where we're going to talk about the three assumptions of multimedia learning. We're going to talk a little bit really quick about refutation text, and then finally we're going to talk a little bit about three learning principles, and then do a quick teaching demonstration. Whew! So we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time. Let's get started. So we're starting off with the cognitive load theory. And this theory really discusses how human beings process information from our working memory, which is teeny tiny, maybe about 7 pieces of information for about 20 seconds without rehearsal, to our long-term memory, which is ginormous as far as we know. And a huge part of the cognitive load theory is the actual cognitive load. We'll start off talking about the intrinsic cognitive load. This is what do we need to know and how does it tie into what we already know. Moving into the extraneous cognitive load, which is all of the distractors, all of the crap that we don't really need to know, we don't really need to care about. Moving into the germane cognitive load, which really focuses on the amount of working memory focused on dealing with the intrinsic load and not the extraneous load. The cognitive theory of multimedia learning discusses how learning is significantly deeper when combining words and pictures instead of just one or the other. And the cognitive theory of multimedia learning takes that into consideration when designing multimedia learning platforms. Instructional designers really need to take into consideration the three assumptions of the cognitive theory of multimedia learning. The very first assumption being dual channels, that we have two channels to process information, our visual channel and our auditory channel. The second assumption is limited capacity. And so limited capacity talks about only a limited amount of information can be processed through these two channels at any given time, which then leads us directly into the third assumption, which is active processing. And active processing talks about attending to relevant information, organizing that information into coherent mental representations, and then integrating those mental representations into what we already know. Now that we've completed our discussion about the three assumptions of the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, that is a mouthful, let's go ahead and start talking a little bit about something called refutation text. And refutation text is a three-part text that can really help a person's spontaneous transfer of knowledge. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's crazy simple. If you take a look at the example right here, you'll notice that the three parts of the refutation text are the incorrect information, then we have the actual refutation cue, and then followed by the correct information, which is based on science and or fact. Now we're going to move into our teaching demonstration, where I'm going to show you how to check out an ebook via the Dayton Metro Library website, while also demonstrating three instructional design principles and an example refutation text. At the end of the demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and point out the three principles I used, and let's see if you can figure them out before I get to that part. Once you've navigated to the Dayton Metro Library site, select the Overdrive option from the middle of the site. This option will automatically guide you to the library's ebook selection. Once we get into Overdrive, there are a couple signposts we need to look for. First, the book we're looking at is on a wait list. So if we're interested in it, we're going to have to put it on hold and wait until an electronic copy becomes available. This tells us what we're looking at. This is an audiobook and this is an ebook. These books are available to borrow. So if this is an interesting book, just select the borrow option. Feel free to explore all of your options until you find something that sparks your interest. We're just going to scroll through here and see if I can find something interesting. If you find a book that's interesting to you, click on its cover to read the description and find out more information about that book. Once you find a book that you want to read, select the borrow button and choose how long you'd like to borrow it for, and then select the borrow button again. After you have borrowed the book, you will receive a success message that tells you how long you have the book for and how many more books you can check out. Additionally, you have an option to read this book in your Kindle app, read it right now in your browser, or download to read later. I'm too excited, so I'm going to read right now in my browser. So the first principle that I demonstrated was temporal contiguity. And this principle discusses that learners grasp information better when any animated portions are presented at the same time as any narration instead of one and then the other. That sounds crazy to me anyways. We can see here that the animation of the arrows and then the simultaneous narration helps the learner to really understand what they're looking at so that they can use that information now and in the future. So since there's so much going on, I wanted to guide the learner to the specific areas that I'm going to discuss. And to do this, I used signaling. If you guessed signaling, good job on you. Signaling is the principle that cues the learner to essential information despite all of the potential distractors. You'll notice that the arrows I used show the learner exactly what's going to be discussed to allow them to focus on those specific areas. The last principle I used was the coherence principle to simplify the discussion about how much time a book can be borrowed for. The coherence principle is all about removing the extraneous, removing the distractions so that the learner can focus on specifically what you, the instructor, want them to focus on. I removed all of the extraneous and distracting narration since the learner can see for themselves the various options and they don't need me to read these out loud to them. Our final demonstration is going to show how easy it is to build a refutation text. Like we talked about previously, refutation text is a three-part text that enhances spontaneous transfer of knowledge. Here we can see that there are three parts of refutation text. First, we have the misconception statement or the incorrect information statement. Then we have the cue, and then we have the correct statement or the correct information based on science and fact. Here we have a quick little demonstration to show how easy it is to form a refutation text. First, we need to start off with our misconception statement. So, out of these three statements down here, the one that sounds the most misconceived is this one. Some people think borrowing books is difficult. Now we can move on to our refutation cue to let our audience know that that first statement is not correct. Thankfully, that is not true. And then finally, we have our correction statement, which is right here. As we just demonstrated, borrowing ebooks is quite easy, as is doing a refutation text.